Before I tell you what those men said when they thought no woman was listening, I need you to do something for me. Press that like button right now. Because where I come from, when somebody shares a story around the table, you nod your head to show you heard them. That like button is your nod. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, stories nobody else will tell you, press subscribe, because I have 30 years of them tucked away in this old head of mine. Now before I start, I want you to type in the comments below where in the world you are watching this from. I have never in my whole life been further than 3 counties over from where I was born, so you telling me you are watching this from some place I have never heard of, that is going to be the most exciting part of my whole day. Now sit yourself down, get comfortable, and let me tell you about 30 years of biscuits, gravy, and secrets. My name is Miriam. I will not tell you my last name because some of the men I am about to talk about still have grandsons living in my community, and I am an old woman, not a foolish one. But I will tell you everything else. I will tell you what I heard standing over a wood stove, with my apron soaked through with sweat, ladling out bean soup to 50 hungry men who forgot, every single time, that a woman with 2 good ears was standing right there among them. I was 19 years old the first time I cooked for a barn raising. That was in the spring, and the ground was still soft from the winter thaw, and a young family 2 farms over from ours had lost their barn to a lightning strike the summer before. They had been getting by without one, borrowing space from neighbors, and the bishop finally said it was time the community came together and built them a new one. My mother had always been the one who went to these things. She was known for her chicken and dumplings, and men would talk about her cooking for weeks after. But that spring she was carrying my youngest brother and could not stand for long hours over a stove, so she sent me in her place with her recipe cards and her strict instructions. I remember walking up to that farm before the sun was even all the way up, carrying a basket so heavy it near pulled my arm from the socket, and seeing maybe 60 men already gathered, some of them still rubbing sleep from their eyes, drinking coffee out of tin cups, waiting for the timber to be laid out. And I remember thinking, I am going to stand in that kitchen all day and cook for these men, and not one of them is going to look at me twice, because that is simply how it was. The kitchen was a woman's place, and the frame of a barn going up in the yard was a man's place, and the 2 hardly ever crossed except when a plate needed filling or a jug needed refilling. What I did not understand yet, what I would come to understand over the next 30 years, is that a kitchen window is a strange kind of place. It is close enough to hear everything, but far enough that men forget you are there at all. A man will stand 30 feet from a house and talk about the weather like it is the most guarded secret in the world, but he will stand 10 feet from an open kitchen window, drinking the coffee a woman just poured him, and say things to his brother or his neighbor that he would never say if he thought for 1 second she could hear him. I do not know why that is. Maybe it is because the kitchen becomes like furniture to them. Maybe it is because when a man is working with his hands, tired and sweat, his tongue gets looser than he means it to. Whatever the reason, I spent 30 years standing at that invisible spot where the kitchen meets the yard, and I heard things that would break your heart, and things that would have you laughing so hard you'd have to sit down, and things that changed how I looked at every single man in my community. That first barn raising, I did not hear anything worth telling you about. I was too nervous, too focused on not burning the biscuits, too worried my mother's dumplings would come out wrong and shame our family name. But by my 3rd or 4th barn raising, I had settled into the rhythm of it. I knew how to peel 40 pounds of potatoes without losing feeling in my hands. I knew how to keep 3 pots going on a stove that only had 2 working burners. And once my hands learned the work well enough that my mind did not have to think about it anymore, that is when my ears started doing the listening. The first thing I ever heard that stuck with me, I heard it from a man named Eli. He was maybe 25 at the time, already married, already with 2 little ones running around his farm. He was standing near the kitchen window with an older man, a widower everybody just called Uncle Sam, even though he wasn't uncle to half the people who called him that. And Eli was talking low, the way a man talks when he thinks the noise of the hammers and the saws will cover his voice. He said, "I do not know how to tell my wife I am afraid." Uncle Sam did not say anything back right away. He just kept working, fitting a peg into a beam, and after a while he said, "Afraid of what?" And Eli said, "Afraid we will not have enough." The crops did poorly this year. I have not told her how bad it really is. I keep telling her it will turn around, but I do not believe it myself anymore. I stood there with a wooden spoon in my hand, stirring a pot of gravy, and I felt like I had walked in on something private, something a wife should hear before a stranger's daughter cooking in a kitchen ever should. But I could not unhear it. And Uncle Sam, he set down his hammer, and he put his hand on Eli's shoulder, and he said something I never forgot. He said, "Your wife married a man, not a harvest. She will stand with you through a bad year, same as a good one, but only if you let her stand with you at all. The worst thing you can do is carry it alone and let her feel like she married a stranger." I never told a soul what I heard that day, not even my own mother. But I thought about it for years afterward, because it taught me something about the men in my community that I had never considered before. From the outside, from where the women stood, the men always looked so sure of themselves. They spoke plainly. They made decisions. They did not cry in front of anybody. They carried themselves like the weight of the world was something they had simply agreed to hold without complaint. But standing at that kitchen window, I learned that underneath all that plain speaking and sure footing, there was fear in them, same as there was fear in any of us. They were just better at hiding it, or thought they had to be. Over the years, I cooked for barn raisings all across our district, and even a few in the districts nearby, when word got around about my cooking, which I say with humility, because really it was my mother's recipes I never strayed far from. And each barn raising brought its own stories, its own conversations I was never supposed to hear. Let me tell you about a few more of them, because I think they will surprise you the way they surprised me. There was a barn raising when I was maybe 23, for a family whose barn had simply gotten too old and too small for their growing herd. It was a hot day in July, the kind where the men stripped down to their undershirts by mid-morning, and the sweat ran off them in rivers. I was working in the kitchen with 2 other women, canning tomatoes on one side of the room and frying chicken on the other, and the windows were open wide to let out the heat. 2 young men, brothers as it turned out, were sitting just outside the window taking a break, drinking water from a dipper, and the younger one said to the older one, "I think I am going to ask Sarah Miller to marry me." The older brother laughed, not a mean laugh, but a surprised one, and said, "Sarah Miller? You have not spoken 10 words to that girl in your whole life." And the younger brother got quiet for a second, and then he said, "I know, but I watch her at the singings. She is always the one who makes sure nobody sits alone. Last month there was a boy nobody wanted to talk to, that Hostetler boy who stutters, and she sat next to him the whole night and did not make him feel strange about it once. I do not need to talk to a girl to know her heart. I have been watching her heart for a year now. I nearly dropped my frying spoon. I was young myself then, unmarried, and I remember standing there thinking that was one of the most beautiful things I had ever heard, and this young man had said it so plainly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, that you could know somebody's heart before you ever knew their voice. I found out 2 years later that he did marry her, and by all accounts they had a good marriage, and every time I saw her at a gathering, I thought about what her husband had said about her before he ever worked up the courage to speak to her. Not every conversation I overheard was so tender. Men can be crude too, same as anybody, and I heard my fair share of jokes not fit for polite company. Jokes about wives and mothers-in-law and neighbors. The kind of talk men think is harmless because they believe no woman is close enough to hear it. I will not repeat most of that here, because it does not teach anything. It is just foolishness. The same foolishness you would hear from men anywhere in the world. Amish or English, doesn't matter. Men joke rough when they think they are alone, and that is simply the truth of it, and I do not hold it against them, because I have heard women talk plenty rough themselves when they think no man is listening. But some of what I heard was neither tender nor crude. It was simply honest in a way that surprised me every time, because honesty like that was not something the men in my community showed easily. Not in front of their wives, not in front of the bishop, sometimes not even in front of themselves. I remember a barn raising for a family who had just lost their oldest son to a farming accident the winter before. The barn they were raising was not a replacement for anything burned or fallen down. It was simply time for a bigger one. But the whole community knew this family was still grieving, and the mood at that raising was different from any other I had cooked for. Quieter. The hammers still swung, and the saws still cut, but there was less laughter drifting up from the yard than usual. I was inside making coffee, keeping the pot going all day because grief makes men thirsty in a way that has nothing to do with the heat, and I heard the father of the family, a man named Jonas, talking to his brother-in-law near the window. Jonas said, "I keep waiting to stop hearing him in the yard. I keep waiting to walk out to the barn and not expect to see him there." His brother-in-law did not offer him any easy words. He did not say time heals all wounds, or God has a plan. The kind of things people say when they do not know what else to say. He just said, "I do not think that stops, Jonas. I lost my own boy 9 years ago, and I still walk out to my barn some mornings, and for 1/2 a second, I think I am going to see him. It does not stop. It just gets to where you can carry it and still put one foot in front of the other." And Jonas said, "How long did that take you?" And his brother-in-law said, "I am still working on it." I stood at that window with tears running down my face, and I had to turn away and pretend to be stirring something so the other women in the kitchen would not ask what was wrong. That conversation taught me something about grief that I carried with me the rest of my life. That grief is not something a strong man simply overcomes. That even the men who seemed the toughest, the ones who worked from before sunup until after sundown without complaint, carried sorrows in them that never fully closed up. They just learned to work around the wound same as you would work around a bad knee or a weak back. Now I want to tell you about the funniest thing I ever heard at a barn raising. Because after a story like that last one, I think we could all use a laugh. And Lord knows I have earned the right to tell a funny story after 30 years standing over a hot stove. This happened when I was maybe 30 years old. Married myself by then with children of my own, still cooking for barn raisings, because by that point it had become something people expected of me, and truthfully something I had grown to love. Strange as that sounds for as much work as it was. There was an older man in our community, a grandfather many times over, named Amos, who was known for being about the crankiest, most particular man you would ever meet. He complained about everything. The coffee was too weak or too strong, never right in between. The weather was too hot or too cold. The young men did not swing a hammer the way men used to swing a hammer in his day. At this particular barn raising, Amos was standing with two other older men near the kitchen window, and one of them, trying to get a rise out of him the way old friends do, said, "Amos, what did you think of the sermon on Sunday?" And Amos said, "I have heard that sermon delivered better 40 years ago by a preacher with half the education." And the other man said, "Well, what about your daughter-in-law's cooking? I hear she has taken over the Sunday meals." And Amos let out this long sigh, this dramatic old man sigh, and said, "She puts too much salt in everything." I have told her. She does not listen. My wife, rest her soul, knew exactly how much salt a dish needed without ever measuring a thing, and this one measures everything with a little spoon and still gets it wrong. The first man laughed and said, "Amos, is there anything in this world that meets your standards?" And without missing a single beat, without even a pause to think about it, Amos said, "Miriam's cooking. That woman in the kitchen right now. Her biscuits are the only thing I have eaten in 10 years that tastes exactly the way it is supposed to taste." Now I was standing right there at that window, close enough to hear every word, and my face went red as a beet, because I had never once heard Amos say a kind word about anything in all the years I had known him. And the other men started laughing and teasing him, saying, "Well, don't let his wife hear you talking about another woman's biscuits like that." And Amos got flustered and gruff and said, "Oh, hush, you know what I mean," and stomped off back toward the barn frame muttering about how nobody could take a compliment as a compliment anymore. I never told him I heard that. I let him keep thinking his secret good opinion of my cooking was safe. But every single barn raising after that, I made sure his biscuits came out a little bit before everyone else's, still warm, and he never said another cross word to me in all the years I knew him after, though he never gave me another compliment either. That was simply Amos's way, and I came to love him for it, crankiness and all. Let me tell you about another kind of conversation I overheard. One that touches on something I do not think people outside our community always understand. There is a picture some folks have of Amish life, that it is simple, that everyone agrees on everything, that nobody ever struggles with the choices in front of them. That was never true. Not in my community. Not in any community of people I have ever known. Because people are people no matter what clothes they wear, or what language they speak at home. There was a young man, maybe 18 or 19, at a barn raising when I was in my late 20s. He had not yet joined the church. Still in that time young people have before they decide whether to be baptized and commit fully to the faith and the community. I heard him talking to an older man, not his father. I believe it was an uncle. And he said, "I do not know if I can do this. I do not know if I can promise my whole life to something before I have even seen what else is out there." And the uncle, instead of getting angry, instead of lecturing him the way I half expected, said, "Then do not promise it yet. Nobody is chasing you out the door with a switch. You go see what is out there if you need to see it. But I will tell you what I know, having lived 70 years now on this earth. I have seen young men leave and come back grateful for what they found here. And I have seen young men leave and never come back. And both of those men were loved by this family either way. The only thing I ask is that whatever you choose it because it is true to you, and not because you are afraid of one thing or running toward another thing without knowing what it really is. The young man was quiet for a long while, and then he said, "Do you think less of me for even having these thoughts?" And the uncle said, "I would think less of you if you did not have them. A faith you never questioned is not much of a faith at all. It is just a habit you never examined. Question it. Wrestle with it. If you come out the other side choosing it, you will choose it with your whole heart, not just because it is the only door you ever knew existed." I do not know what became of that young man, whether he stayed or whether he left, because I never learned his name and never saw him again after that day. He was visiting from another district for the raising. But I have thought about that conversation more times than I can count over the years, especially in later years when I watched some of my own grandchildren wrestle with those same questions. And I remembered that old uncle's words, and I tried to give my own grandchildren that same kind of room to wrestle honestly, instead of forcing them into a box they had not chosen for themselves. Now, I want to tell you about the men and their pride, because pride is a funny thing among men who are taught from childhood that pride is a sin, that humility is the highest virtue, and yet pride finds its way into a man's heart, no matter how hard the church tries to root it out, same as it does in anybody. I remember a barn raising where two neighboring families were building barns of similar size within the same month, and there was this quiet competition going on between them. Not out loud. Nobody would ever admit to competing over something as prideful as a barn, but you could feel it in the air. I heard two men from these different families talking near my kitchen window, both of them trying so hard to sound humble, while clearly being anything but. One man said, "Of course we are not trying to build anything fancy, just a simple barn to hold the animals through winter." And the other man said, "Oh, us too, nothing special. Though I did want the loft a bit higher than most, just for practical reasons, nothing to do with looking nice." And the first man said, "Well, ours will have the good cedar shingles, but that is only because cedar lasts longer, not for any other reason." And they went back and forth like that for a good 5 minutes, each one trying to one-up the other while insisting neither of them cared one bit about looking better than the other. And I stood there at my stove just about biting my lip to keep from laughing out loud, because it was so plain to see what they were really doing, and so plain that they themselves could not see it, or would not let themselves see it, because pride wearing the mask of humility is still pride. It just knows how to talk itself past your own conscience. I share that story not to make fun of those men, because I loved them both. I cooked for their families for decades, but because I think it shows something true about all of us, Amish or otherwise. We can dress our pride up in whatever language we want, call it practicality, call it tradition, call it whatever sounds acceptable. But underneath it, we are all just people who want to be thought well of, who want our work to matter, who want somebody to look at what we built with our hands and say, "Well done." I want to tell you now about something a little more serious, something that took me years to fully understand the weight of. There was a family in our community, and I will not say which one even all these years later, whose father struggled with drink. This is not something people like to talk about, because it does not fit the picture folks have of us. But it happened, same as it happens anywhere people live and struggle, and sometimes fail. At a barn raising for a different family entirely, I overheard two men talking about this father, worried about him, worried about his wife and children. One man said he was not himself again on Saturday. His wife had to send their oldest boy to fetch him from the tavern 3 towns over. The other man said, "Does the bishop know?" And the first man said, "The bishop knows. What can the bishop do that has not already been tried?" We have talked to him. We have prayed with him. We have offered him work here, work there, tried to keep him busy and away from that road that leads to town. Nothing holds for long. And there was a silence, and then the second man said something I have never forgotten, because it showed me a kind of mercy I did not always associate with how strict some parts of our community could be about rules and order. He said, "Then we keep loving his children anyway. We keep inviting his family to every gathering, same as anybody else's family. We do not let his struggle become his children's shame. Whatever he is fighting, that is between him and God. But those little ones did not choose their father's battle, and I will not have them made to feel like outsiders in their own community because of it." I watched over the following years how that family was indeed folded into every gathering, every barn raising, every wedding, every funeral, with no less warmth than any other family, even as everyone in the community quietly knew what that father struggled with. Nobody spoke of it openly, but nobody turned their children away either, and I think that taught me more about what real community means than almost anything else I witnessed in 30 years of cooking at these events. It is easy to love people when everything about them is easy to love. It is a different thing entirely to keep loving people through the parts of them that are hard, without turning it into gossip, without turning it into shame, just quietly making room at the table anyway. Let me lighten things up again, because I do not want you to think all I heard over the years was sorrow and struggle. Though I have given you a fair share of both so far, mostly what I heard, day in and day out, was just the ordinary talk of ordinary men doing ordinary work, and some of it was so plain and simple it makes me smile even now just remembering it. I remember hearing 2 young fathers arguing, in the friendliest way possible, about whose children were more trouble. One man said his youngest had gotten into the henhouse and chased every single chicken out into the yard just to watch them run. The other man said that was nothing compared to his boy, who had once hidden a whole basket of eggs under his bed because he liked the way they felt, and by the time anybody found them they had gone bad and the whole room smelled something terrible for a week. They went back and forth like that, each story topping the last, laughing so hard at their own children's mischief that one of them had to stop working for a minute just to catch his breath. I stood at that window smiling to myself, thinking about my own children's mischief, thinking how every generation of parents thinks their children invented trouble, when really, children have been getting into henhouses and hiding eggs under beds since the beginning of time. I heard men talk about their gardens with more passion than some men talk about their own children, arguing over whether tomatoes should be started indoors or straight in the ground, whether a certain kind of squash was worth the trouble it took to grow. I heard men complain about their horses, brag about their horses, worry over sick horses like they were worrying over sick family members, because in a way, on a farm, they were family. They were how a family survived. I heard men debate scripture, gently, respectfully, the kind of debate where 2 men could disagree about the meaning of a passage and still shake hands and share a meal together afterward, without any hard feelings. Because that was simply how disagreement was supposed to work, at least in the community I grew up in. I heard men worry about their aging parents, wondering how much longer a father could keep working the fields before his body gave out entirely, wondering how to have that conversation with a proud old man who would rather work himself into the grave than admit he needed help. I heard sons speak with a tenderness about their fathers that would surprise you. Men who from the outside seemed stern and unshakable, admitting quietly to a brother or a friend that they were afraid of losing their father, that they did not know what the farm or the family would look like once the old man was gone. There was one conversation, and I think of this one often, especially now that I am the age those old fathers were back then. Two brothers were talking near my window, and the older one said, "Pa is slowing down." I do not think he sees it himself, but I see it. He has trouble climbing into the hayloft anymore. He pretends he does not, but I can see it costs him something now that never used to cost him anything. And the younger brother said, "What do we do about it?" And the older brother said, "We do not take it from him all at once." A man like Pa, if we tell him one day he cannot work the farm anymore, it will kill him faster than any illness could. We just start doing more ourselves, quietly, without making a show of it, so that by the time he does slow down for good, it will not feel like something was taken from him. It will just feel like the natural way of things. I thought that was one of the wisest things I ever heard. That kind of gentle care that lets a person keep their dignity even while you are protecting them. Doing the hard work of taking on more responsibility without ever making the person you are protecting feel diminished by it. I tried to remember that lesson years later, when it was my own husband slowing down, when it was my own sons quietly taking on more of the farm work, without ever once making their father feel like less of a man for needing the help. Now I want to talk about my own husband for a moment. Because you might be wondering, all these years standing at that kitchen window, did I ever hear him say anything he did not know I heard? I did, actually, more than once, and I will tell you about the time that mattered most to me. My husband's name was Daniel, and he was not a man who spoke much about his feelings, not to me directly anyway. He showed his love in the way he fixed things around the house before I even asked, in the way he always made sure my rocking chair was pulled close to the fire in winter, in the way he never once complained about anything I put on the table, even on the nights I knew supper had not turned out quite right. But he was not a man for saying the words out loud, not even after 30, 40 years of marriage. At a barn raising when we were both getting on in years, I heard him talking to a younger man who was struggling in his own marriage, who had come to Daniel for advice, because Daniel was well respected in the community by then, an elder in every sense but title. The young man said, "I do not know how to make her understand how much I care, when I am not a man good with words." And I heard my husband, my own husband of all those years, say, "You do not need better words. You need to notice her. That is all she wants, truly, underneath everything else. My wife does not need me to tell her I love her every day, though maybe I should say it more than I do. What she needs is to know I see her. I see when she is tired. I see when something is troubling her even if she has not said a word about it. I see when she has worked hard on a meal, and I make sure to tell her it was good. Not because I am supposed to, but because it was true. That is what she needs from me. Not poetry, just attention. Give your wife your attention. Truly give it to her, and the words will matter less than you think." I stood there at that window with a lump in my throat so big I could hardly swallow, because in 40 years of marriage, my husband had never said anything close to that to my face, and yet there it was. Everything I had ever needed to hear from him, said plainly to a stranger's son while he thought I was too far away and too busy to hear it. I never told him I heard it. I carried it instead, quietly, the way you carry a warm stone in your pocket on a cold day, taking it out sometimes, just to remind yourself of its warmth. He passed 8 years ago now, and on the hardest days since, I still think of that conversation, and it still warms me the same way it did that very first day. I think that is part of why I loved cooking for barn raising so much, if I am honest with you, beyond even the joy of feeding a hungry community and being useful to the people I loved. It was that window into the hearts of men who did not always know how to open their hearts any other way. Our community, like many communities, did not always give men much room to speak of tender things directly. A man was expected to be steady, to be capable, to provide, to lead his family without complaint. There was not always a place for a man to simply say, "I am scared," or "I am proud of my son," or "I miss my father." Not in the open, not where everyone could see him say it. But at a barn raising, working alongside another man, hammer in hand, sweat on his brow, somehow those walls came down just a little. Maybe it was the physical work itself, the way working with your hands frees something up in your mind and your tongue that sitting still never quite does. Maybe it was the comfort of another man beside him who was working just as hard, who understood without needing it explained. Whatever the reason, I heard those walls come down more times than I can count over 30 years, and every time, I felt like I had been given a gift, a secret window into the truest parts of people who did not always show those parts anywhere else. I want to share one more difficult story before I move toward the happier memories, because I think it is important, and because it changed how I understood my role in that kitchen more than almost anything else. There was a barn raising for a young couple, newly married, building their very first barn on land given to them by the wife's family. It should have been a joyful day, and mostly it was, but I overheard something that troubled me for a long while after. 2 older men were talking near the window. Men I respected. Men who had always struck me as fair and good. And they were talking about the young husband. About how his new wife came from a family with more land and more money than his own family had. And one of the men said something unkind. Something about how the young man had married up and everyone knew it. And there would always be a shadow on that marriage because of it. A debt he would spend his whole life trying to repay, just by being worthy of her family's generosity. I did not like hearing that. It sat wrong with me all through the rest of that day, and for a long time after. Because I knew that young couple. I had watched them court. I had seen how they looked at each other, and there was nothing in that marriage that had anything to do with land or money. There was only 2 young people who loved each other plainly and simply, same as any other couple. And here were 2 older men who should have known better, reducing that love down into something transactional, something to be measured and judged. I never said anything, of course. That was not my place, standing there with a wooden spoon in my hand. But I thought about it for years, how even good people, even people who mean well most of the time, can carry small unkindnesses in them, judgments they never quite examine, and how those judgments can slip out sideways in a conversation they think nobody is hearing. It taught me to be more careful with my own judgments, to ask myself, when I found myself thinking unkindly about somebody, whether that thought was really fair, or whether it was just something I had absorbed without ever examining it. Same as those 2 older men had clearly absorbed their own notions about marriage and money and worth, without ever really looking hard at where those notions came from. That young couple, by the way, went on to have one of the strongest marriages I ever witnessed in our community. 5 children, a farm that thrived, and a partnership that anyone could see was built on real love. Whatever those 2 old men whispered that day, it never touched what that couple actually had, and I take some comfort in that even now. Let me turn now towards some of the sweeter memories, because there were so many more sweet moments than difficult ones, and I do not want you to walk away from this thinking barn raisings were full of sorrow and unkindness, because mostly, they were full of joy. I remember a barn raising where an old grandfather, must have been near 80 years old, insisted on climbing partway up the frame even though everyone told him he was too old for it, that he should stay on the ground and direct the younger men instead. He would not hear of it. And I heard him talking to his grandson as they worked, telling him stories about the very first barn he ever helped raise, back when he was younger than his grandson was now. Stories about men long since past who had taught him everything he knew about building. He talked about a barn raising during a terrible drought year, when nobody had much of anything, but the community came together anyway and built a barn for a widow who had no husband and no sons old enough to help her, and how that barn still stood, 60 years later, a little weathered but strong as ever. A monument to what people could do for each other even when they had nothing extra to give. His grandson said, "Why does that story matter so much to you, Grandpa?" And the old man said, "Because it is easy to help somebody when you have plenty. It means something different entirely to help somebody when you have nothing. And you give anyway. That is the kind of community I want you to build when I am gone. Not the kind that only shows up when it is convenient, but the kind that shows up especially when it is not." I heard laughter that day too, so much laughter. Men teasing that old grandfather about his stubbornness, about insisting on climbing that frame at his age, and him laughing right along with them, proud of himself, proud of the community he had helped build over 80 years of living in it. That barn still stands today, as far as I know, and every time I think of it, I think of that old man's voice telling his grandson about a widow's barn raised 60 years before either of them were even born. I remember a barn raising where a shy young man, one who had always struggled to make friends, finally found his footing among the other young men because he turned out to be remarkably skilled with a hammer, faster and more precise than men twice his age. I heard the older men praising him, one after another, saying things like, "Where did you learn to work like that?" And, "My own son could learn a thing or two from watching you." And I watched that shy young man's shoulders straighten a little more with each compliment, watched him find a kind of confidence in that barn frame that he had never found anywhere else. Sometimes all a person needs is one place where they are good at something, one place where people notice them for the right reasons. And for that young man, it was the frame of a barn going up under a summer sky. I remember barn raisings that turned into impromptu celebrations, when the frame went up faster than expected, men cheering and clapping each other on the back, someone always producing a harmonica from a pocket, children running wild through the yard, while their mothers tried half-heartedly to call them back to help with chores. The whole day tasting like community, in a way that is hard to put into words if you have never experienced it yourself. I remember the smell of sawdust, mixing with the smell of my own cooking, drifting out the kitchen window, and I remember thinking, even in the hardest years, even when my own family was struggling same as everyone else, that there was nowhere else on earth I would rather be than standing in that kitchen, part of something bigger than myself, feeding the hands that were building shelter for a neighbor's animals and a neighbor's livelihood. There is one more story I want to tell you before I bring this all toward its end, and it is one of the strangest ones I ever collected in 30 years of listening, because it did not involve grief or pride or love in the way the others did. It involved a secret, a real secret, one that took me years to fully understand the shape of. I was maybe 40 years old at the time, well settled into my role as the woman everyone expected to see in the kitchen at any barn raising within a day's ride. There was a family in our district, quiet people, kept mostly to themselves, and the father of that family, a man named Levi, had a reputation for being tight-fisted, for never quite giving as much to the community fund as other families of similar means, for always having some excuse ready when it came time to donate toward a widow's needs, or a family who had fallen on hard times. People talked about it, quietly, the way people do, never to his face. But the whisper followed him from gathering to gathering, that Levi Zook was a man who loved his money more than he loved his neighbors. At a barn raising that spring, I heard two men talking near the window, and one of them was defending Levi in a way that surprised me. Because I had heard this same man complain about Levi's tight-fistedness at a wedding not 2 months before. He said, I did not want to say anything before, because it was not my story to tell, but I think it is time somebody understood Levi a little better before this talk about him gets any worse than it already has. The other man said, Go on then. And the first man said, You know Levi lost his first wife many years back, before he married the woman he has now. What most people do not know is that she did not just pass from illness the way everyone assumes. She left him. Ran off with an English man she met while working at a shop in town, back before Levi joined the church for good. Back when things were still looser for him, she took what little money they had saved together and left him with a mountain of debt and a broken heart, and 2 small children to raise alone. It took him 12 years to pay off what she took. 12 years of scraping and saving and going without. 12 years of neighbors whispering about him even then, wondering why he seemed so hard about money, never understanding what he had lived through to get to that hardness. The second man was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, I never knew any of that. And the first man said, Most people do not. Because Levi has never told a soul, too proud and too hurt to explain himself to anybody, would rather let people think him tight-fisted than let them know the truth of what happened to him. But I grew up 2 farms over from him. I watched it happen with my own eyes as a boy, and I have carried that story quiet for 30 years out of respect for him. I am only telling you now because I am tired of hearing good men speak poorly of him without knowing what he survived to become the man he is today. I stood at that window with my hand still in a bowl of biscuit dough, absolutely stunned, because I had heard the whispers about Levi Zook same as anybody, and I had let myself believe them same as anybody, and here was the truth of it. A truth so much sadder and so much more complicated than any of us had imagined. I thought about that conversation for years afterward, and every time I saw Levi at a gathering after that day, standing a little apart from the others the way he always did, I looked at him differently. I saw a man who had built a wall around himself brick by brick, not out of greed, but out of a wound that had never properly healed. A wound nobody around him even knew existed, because he had chosen to carry it silently, rather than risk anybody's pity. Levi passed some years later, and at his funeral, his children spoke of a father who worked himself half to death to make sure they never went without, who never remarried because he said once was enough heartbreak for one lifetime, who gave more to that family's church fund in his final years, once his debts were finally paid, than almost any other family in the district, quietly, without ever wanting credit for it. I sat in that funeral service, and I thought about that conversation I overheard at his window all those years before, and I thought about how much unkind talk that man had endured over decades. All because nobody but a handful of people ever knew the real story underneath his hardness. It taught me, more than almost anything else I ever overheard, to be slow to judge a man's hardness. Because you rarely know what softened into that hardness in the first place. What wound got covered over by it. What love got buried so deep beneath it that even the man himself sometimes forgot it was still there. I want to tell you about a lighter memory now, because I have given you another heavy one, and I think we both need a bit of relief before we go on. There was a barn raising, must have been when I was about 50 years old, for a family building their barn during an especially cold spring. The kind of cold that makes even hardened farmers complain a little more than usual. I had kept the coffee pot going nearly non-stop that whole day, and around mid-afternoon I overheard two men, brothers-in-law by marriage, arguing about something so small and so foolish that I still laugh thinking about it even now. They were arguing about whether a rooster could actually predict the weather. One man swore up and down that his rooster crowed differently before a storm came in, said he had never once been wrong in 15 years of watching that bird, said he trusted that rooster more than he trusted the weather predictions in the almanac. The other man told him that was the biggest foolishness he had ever heard in his life, that a rooster crowed because it was a rooster and roosters crowed, and there was no more meaning behind it than there was meaning behind a rooster's foolish strut around a henyard. They went back and forth on this for a solid 10 minutes, each one getting more animated than the last. Other men nearby starting to gather around just to listen to the argument, some taking sides, some just enjoying the show, until finally somebody suggested they settle it with a wager, and the two brothers-in-law shook hands right there, and agreed that if it rained within 3 days, the rooster doubter owed the rooster believer a sack of feed corn. And if it did not rain, the rooster believer owed the rooster doubter the same. I never did find out who won that wager, because I moved on to a different district before I heard the end of it. But I think about those two grown men, fathers and grandfathers even by that point in their lives, arguing with the seriousness of a courtroom trial over whether a rooster could predict rain. And it reminds me that even in a community built on plainness and seriousness of purpose, there was always room for foolishness, always room for two men to enjoy a good argument about nothing at all, just for the pleasure of the argument itself and the company of each other while they had it. I heard so much foolishness like that over the years, arguments over whose mule was more stubborn, whose dog was smarter, whose grandfather had told the taller tale, and every single time I treasured it. Because it reminded me that joy did not need a reason, that laughter did not need to be earned through hardship first, that sometimes the very best moments of a hard-working life are the small, foolish ones, the ones that do not matter at all in the grand scheme of things, but matter enormously in the moment they are happening. There was one more kind of conversation I want to share with you, one I heard more than once over the years, in different forms from different men. And it is perhaps the one that stayed with me most, because it touched on something I think about every single day of my life, now that I am old myself. More than once I heard older men talking quietly about death, not in a fearful way, but in a way that seemed almost peaceful, almost prepared. I remember one older man, must have been near 90, at what I believe was the last barn raising he ever attended before he passed a year or so later, standing near my window telling a younger man that he was not afraid of what came next, that he had lived a full life, loved a good wife, raised children who loved him back, built barns and homes and a whole life out of nothing but hard work and faith, and that whatever waited for him on the other side of this life, he had made his peace with it a long time ago. He said, "The only thing that scares me anymore is leaving work undone. Not my own work, that is mostly finished now, but the work of teaching the next ones what matters, making sure they understand that none of this, The land, the barns, the harvests, none of it means anything without the people you share it with. If I have taught my children and grandchildren that much, then I can go whenever the good Lord decides it is time, and I will go without complaint. I stood at that window with tears in my eyes, same as I so often did, and I thought about how strange and beautiful it was that a barn raising, an event meant to build something new, something that would stand for decades, so often became the place where old men made their peace with their own endings. There was something fitting about that, I always thought. Something about raising a barn frame up toward the sky that made men think about their own place in the larger span of time, about what they were building that would outlast them, about the people they were building it for. I think of that old man often now that I am the age he was then. Now that I sit in my own rocking chair thinking my own thoughts about what comes next, I am not afraid either. And I think part of the reason I am not afraid is because I spent 30 years listening to men far wiser than myself work through their own fears at that kitchen window. And somewhere along the way, without ever meaning to, I absorbed a little bit of their peace right alongside their secrets. I want to tell you about the last barn raising I ever cooked for on my own, because it feels important to share how this all came to an end, or rather, how it did not really end so much as it changed hands. I was 68 years old. My hands were not what they used to be. My back complained after only a few hours of standing, and though I would never have admitted it to anyone, I knew that day was likely to be my last one running a kitchen for a barn raising by myself. My granddaughter, a young woman of 19, the same age I had been at my very first barn raising all those decades before, was working alongside me that day, learning the recipes, learning the rhythm of it, though she did not yet know it would soon be hers to carry forward. Partway through the day, I stepped outside for a moment to catch some air, my joints aching, and I stood near that same kind of window I had stood near my whole life. Except this time I was on the outside of it, listening to the sounds of my own kitchen instead of the sounds of the yard. And I heard 2 men. Men I did not know well, visiting from another district, talking as they worked. One of them said, "Whose kitchen is that? Whoever is cooking. That bread is the best I have had in years." And the other man said, "That is old Miriam's kitchen. She has been cooking for barn raisings in this district for longer than most of us have been alive. My father used to talk about her cooking when he was a young man." And the first man said, "Will she keep doing it much longer? She looks tired." And the second man said something that I did not expect, something that caught in my throat the way that conversation about my husband had caught in my throat all those years before. He said, "I heard her granddaughter is learning the recipes now." I suppose that is how it goes. Somebody spends their whole life building something, and then they hand it to the next one, and the next one carries it forward without even realizing what they were given. Not really. Not until they are old themselves, and somebody is standing outside their own window saying the very same thing about them. I stood there in the yard, an old woman with aching joints, listening to strangers talk about me like I was already a memory, and instead of feeling sad about it, I felt something closer to peace. Because he was right. That is exactly how it goes. My mother had taught me her recipes and her ways, and I had spent 30 years standing in that kitchen, listening at that window. And now it was my granddaughter's turn to learn the recipes, and though she did not know it yet, to someday stand at her own window and hear her own secrets from men who thought no woman was listening. I went back inside that day, and I did not tell anyone what I had overheard. I simply picked up my apron and got back to work. because there was still bread to bake and gravy to stir. And there would be for a few more years yet, though never quite the same way again, because after that day, I started stepping back more and more, letting my granddaughter take the lead, until eventually the kitchen that had been mine for 30 years became hers. I think about all of this often now. In my old age, sitting in my rocking chair with more time to think than I know what to do with, I think about all those men, some of them gone now, some of them grandfathers and great-grandfathers themselves, still working farms not far from where I grew up. I think about everything I heard standing at that window over 30 years, the fear and the pride, the tenderness and the crudeness, the grief and the joy, all of it tangled together the way it always is in real life, in real communities, among real people trying their best to live good lives, and mostly succeeding, sometimes failing, always human underneath whatever face they showed to the world. I want to share just one more small memory before I get to the biggest lesson of all, because it is a short one, but it has stayed with me clearly through all these years, clearer even than some of the longer stories I have already told you. It was near the very end of my time cooking, maybe 2 years before my granddaughter took over the kitchen for good. There was a young father at a barn raising, holding his newborn daughter against his chest in one of those cloth wraps the mothers use, bouncing her gently while he supervised some of the younger boys stacking lumber. Another man walked by and teased him a little, said something like, "Since when does a man carry a baby at a barn raising? That is women's work. Go find your wife." And the young father, without any embarrassment at all, said, "My wife is inside helping with the little ones, and she has earned an hour of rest from this one. This is my daughter too, not just hers. I do not see why loving her and caring for her should only ever be one parent's job. I want her to grow up knowing her father's arms same as her mother's." The other man laughed, not unkindly, and said something about how times were changing, and the young father just smiled and kept bouncing his daughter, entirely unbothered by any of it. I stood at my window with a smile on my face, thinking about how every generation carries forward a little more tenderness than the one before it. How even in a community that prized tradition so highly, tradition itself was never quite as fixed and unchanging as people like to believe. Things shifted, slowly, gently, one small kindness at a time. One father unashamed to hold his daughter in front of other men. One small crack of light let in where the old ways used to stand entirely closed. That memory, small as it is, gives me hope even now. Hope that whatever changes come to any community, in any place, in any time, there will always be room for a little more gentleness than there was before, if people are willing to let it in. I think the biggest lesson I carried away from 30 years of listening at that window is this. People are never quite who they appear to be from the outside. Not entirely. The stern men were tender underneath. The confident men were afraid underneath. The plain-spoken men had poetry in them they never let out except when they thought nobody could hear. And I think that is true of people everywhere, not just in my community. Not just among Amish men working a barn frame under a summer sky. I think if you could stand outside anybody's window long enough, if you could hear what they say when they think nobody with a heart to be moved by it is listening, you would find that same tenderness in almost everyone, buried under whatever hardness the world taught them to wear on the outside. I do not regret a single hour I spent standing over that stove, my feet aching, my hands raw from hot water and lye soap, my back bent over pots of beans and kettles of coffee. I gave that community 30 years of biscuits and gravy, and in exchange, that community gave me 30 years of the truest conversations I ever heard. Conversations men did not even know they were giving me. Conversations I have carried in my heart ever since. Warm as bread straight from the oven. Precious as anything I own. My granddaughter cooks for the barn raisings now, and I like to think that somewhere in that kitchen, she is hearing her own secrets, collecting her own warm stones to carry in her pocket for the rest of her life. I have not asked her what she has heard. That is not my business anymore. That window belongs to her now, same as it once belonged to me, same as it once belonged to my mother before I ever took it over. But I hope, whatever she hears, she carries it the way I carried mine. With tenderness, with discretion, and with a deep and abiding gratitude for the privilege of being trusted with the truest parts of people, even when they never meant to give that trust away. That is my story, 30 years of it, boiled down as best I can into the time we have had together today. I hope it made you laugh a little, and I hope it made you think a little. And maybe, if I did my job right, I hope it made you tear up just once or twice the way it still makes me tear up telling it, even after all these years. Before you go, I want to ask you one more time to press that like button if any part of this story moved you, because that tells me you were listening. Same as I was listening all those years at that kitchen window. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one, because I promise you, 30 years standing in a kitchen gives a woman more stories than she could tell in 100 videos. And do not forget to tell me in the comments where you are watching this from. I mean it. I want to know. An old woman like me does not get to travel much anymore, but through your comments, I get to visit every corner of this world without ever leaving my rocking chair. And there is something truly wonderful about that. Something I never could have imagined back when I was a young girl, carrying a heavy basket up a dirt road to my very first barn raising. Thank you for sitting with me a while today. Go give somebody in your life a little more of your attention this week, the way my Daniel taught that young man all those years ago, because sometimes that is worth more than all the words in the world. I will see you next time, and I will have another story ready for you when you come back.